Welcome to Under the Pallet Map, episode 8. We've talked a lot about being busy, the pressures that face founders. Dan, what do you do when the demand slows down? The complete opposite.
And they're asking one question: how do you operate for less? How do you get cheaper? We need to cut costs. And obviously, particularly the financial side of the business. And we know it's not just us in the operation or in the supply chain that's getting asked that question. It's being asked around the company. The marketing is always one that gets hit first. Training and development stops almost immediately whenever there's a little bit of a margin concern. But yeah, I think when I see this, I find myself having the conversation in the business as to, is cutting costs the best thing that we should do first? And from my perspective, there are many other things that you can do before you just start cutting costs, shedding capability. Because when you do that, of course, you're potentially hampering your ability to grow again once it comes back, because you're hoping that this softening is not permanent, that it's just a cycle, it's an economic challenge that we're going through, and that you will come out the other side. And the last thing you want to do is to turn your business into simply a smaller business that when the growth comes back, you start a new set of problems. Right? All that investment on people and skills and just experience, the experience people have, if you shed it too quickly, too easily, and I am not standing there saying when demand softens, you should just ride it out. I'm not saying that, because that's just not realistic, really. But cutting heads and cutting things out should not necessarily be the first thing you can do, because I know every founder, every leader in a business has got a list in their head of things they wish they could do, but they're just too damn busy to do it. Or if you're the head of a supply chain operation, you have a number of projects you just love to get on with, but you're just fighting with demand all the time, so you just live with it. Processes that are not the best. You've probably got a bunch of stock there that you're not really utilizing. Maybe your warehouse isn't laid out particularly well. I think that in my view, there's a lot of things that you can use that bit of time, that bit of wiggle room in your day or in your team's capacity to add some value, to prepare yourself for the future before you get into that discussion. I don't know. What's your view?
You don't always get the knowledge of what's happening behind the scenes. You can tell when there's a slowdown or you're not meeting targets. Everyone knows at senior level, but they can feel it, but you never know for sure. I think, yes, in the ideal world, I would use this time to try and make the team as effective as possible and reduce excess. You don't always get the time to do that. These things are quite rapid decisions for the most part. You don't normally get told you've got a year and then let's see what happens. I mean, sometimes you do get a bit of insight. Oh, we're not quite hitting targets. Anything can do. These are the great relationships you have with your managers and owners. Where I've been involved in this before, it's not been wholly in my hands. It's of course I've cooperated, collaborated, tried to understand what we can do. You don't always get time, and that's where it's always a shame, because, as you said, these things are things you've always wanted to do but never had time to do. I think the perfect balance is when you get seasonal slowdowns, which are expected.
Yeah.
Then you can utilize your time, fill the gaps, and then you start to operate a bit more effectively and consistently year round.
Yeah. Do you find? I mean, do you have experience of going into a slowdown? Let's say not a planned slowdown, because I get what you're saying there, and that's much easier to navigate. But have you experienced that sense of, what we've got an excess of resource, our inventory is growing because we're just not selling, and there's there's no doubt, right? There's a little bit, maybe panic is overstating it, but there's concern starts to rise in the business. Um, have you been there? Have you had that experience? And did you get the reaction that you wanted? Were you able to buy yourself some time to, or is it that it's just that, yeah, the panic sets in and everybody just wants to cut, cut, cut?
Yeah, I have been in a situation where I could sense the downturn. COVID was a very strange time for retail, as we know. A lot of forecasts were made on shopping behaviours in a very unusual, unprecedented time.
Oh man, yeah.
Stock was bought in the quantities to mirror that. And then, of course, we had embargoes with Russia that followed this. And yeah, so maybe the forecasts and the sales didn't add up. And you start to get a little bit of a feeling, oh, hold on a minute, where we've been thriving during this time. It's unprecedented. It's unusual. It's not the new normal. The new normal is the old normal,
Yeah,
with
with a
some
few
added
tweaks.
geopolitical issues. And our model isn't really reacting too well to these changes, and you can sort of feel like we have to do something here, but the focus isn't necessarily business wide. So you make a bit of a effort to preempt it and make your team as efficient as possible. But over time, um, the proper conversations start happening. And yes, I've been given the opportunity. What would you do? But at the end of the day, the message is the same. How are you going to cut the costs considerably? Um, and whereas I always try and focus on resources last, if people are not being put to value, then it's something you can't hide from.
We could all be very utopian about this and say, oh, well, as you head into a downturn, it's just a great opportunity to do the things that you haven't done for it. There's going to be pressure, right? And you know what? And it may be you have to do a bit of both. That there may be that you have to do some adjustments. Let's take some of the immediate opportunities, because let's also be honest about things. Is most of the time in a business, you have some areas that actually, if you had the opportunity, you would cut it. And
Yeah.
these are times where you just have to say, okay, look, there's never been a better time. I need to fix this. I've been living with it for a long time. I'm going to deal with it. And I think that's good business sense. In every warehouse I've ever worked at, there's this part of the warehouse where there's a load of stock that hasn't moved in a long time. And because you're busy and you're doing it, you just don't tackle it. And these are the times to say, right, we've got those 500 pallets at the back of this place. Let's get them out, understand what's sellable, push it out at a bargain cost, put some effort and some time to clear it. It might even cost you some money. You might lose money by doing it. But what it does is it frees up that space. It means that your warehouse can operate more effectively going forward. You can potentially do some relaying, redefine your process a bit.
Guess a lot of it comes down to the urgency. I mean, they're godsend, some of these downturns. In the retail world, fashion retail, August was traditionally a slow month when all of the suppliers and factories closed in Europe. And before you got the influx of stock in time for October, you'd get these moments, and they were a bit of a godsend because you were able to look at all of these issues that had bugged you throughout the year, update, streamline, build the SOPs, train. But that's a different sort of downtime. Obviously, the business were working with a lot of peaks and troughs. When something's more enforced on you, it comes as a bit of a shock. That's where it can be a bit harder to react in a way we're discussing. I mean, of course, seizing the initiative, but sometimes getting others to give you that time. I mean, have you ever been given the time to actually make a significant change that had an impact on the business and saved slashing or cutting?
Well, the majority of my career has been spent in pretty big businesses. And yeah, of course, we've been through difficulties. Um, well, you could call it the luxury of working with multiple brands or multiple divisions that are not always affected in the same way. So yes, absolutely, I've been under pressure in a certain part of the business that we need to reduce, but we had a little bit of, I guess, the luxury of having other areas of the business that potentially could even temporarily support the others. Yeah, you have to make tough decisions. Right? I mean, there's no getting away with it. But have I been in the situation where I've been under pressure to cut and I've been challenged to say I would also like to do this? Yeah, absolutely. And have I always won that argument? No. But no, we definitely have had times where we said, right, we're going to, for the next 4 months, we're going to use this resource to fix this issue. And I relayed an entire warehouse once while we were still operating because the demand was low. And we had capability to be able to run the operation for a shorter window in the day. And then every day we had half a shift where we would be stopped and we could do various things. And by the end of it, we had a warehouse that was running much more efficiently. So even when demand improved, we were still able to drive it without increasing headcount. So we were able to satisfy some of that seasonal resource without having to recruit it. So I think I guess my first guidance would be is don't always just stick your tin hat on and hope for the best. I think look to see how you would utilize those things, but you need to be. In my mind, you can't just start thinking about it when the downturn starts. You need to be not necessarily preempting a downturn, but you should always, and certainly in my time, I've always had a list of things I want to do, but I can't get to. And so as soon as you start to see that, before even anyone comes knocking on your door and saying, I've noticed that you're not outputting the same amount, therefore, maybe we should be cutting resource, start to utilize and start to do some positive things. So I think it's really important for a founder, a leader, whether it be of the supply chain or of an entire business, to have that constant mindset of, am I maximizing the use of the team, of the resources that I have at my disposal? Because sometimes the downturn might just be you're having a bad month. Well, don't waste that bad month. If you see it, do rather than just say everyone take a week off. Why don't you do some of those long-term projects that you've wanted to do for so long?
I've always had that mindset, always tried to create experts in a team so they're in the best possible position, whatever the case. It's rare as a consultant I've met many businesses with any sort of contingency plan for this type of thing. So, I take pleasure in helping them prepare, helping them identify all the things that they need to do to run more efficiently in the first place. So it's a bit easier as a consultant to go in for sure. Um, I think also it depends on the size of the business. When you're a bigger business, you probably, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably have a little bit more time before. It's more of a layered thing. If you work for a smaller
Yeah.
business, it's much more obvious and apparent as soon as it happens. You haven't got much to cut in the first place. Then you can do your contract negotiations, but it's not like saving hundreds of thousands. It's saving a few thousand. It's a bit more difficult when you're in a smaller position.
I think it's just different. I don't know that it's less. I think in a big business, yeah, to some degree, you have the ability to kind of cover it, maybe, or it not get seen so quickly. I'm not sure that's true or not. But of course, in a bigger business, you have much more opportunity to do it. Therefore,
Yes.
and you probably have better tools, better insight that you're looking at, so you can see it quicker. And if the CFO can see it, trust me, they'll be pushing back. Whereas in a smaller business, as you say, the opportunity is less. And also, I think your connection to your people is much closer. You know them much better in general. And this is a generalization, but the wider team, you're much closer to. So I think that your personal relationship would mean that you would potentially go through this mindset, this real, I guess, reviewing in your head as to what is the right thing to do, more so than you would in a bigger business, because it's just in a bigger business, sad as it sounds, it is more of a numbers game. You don't know everybody's name. You don't know that, there's layers, and the pressure. The pressure's probably greater, but the pressure is probably more immediate in a smaller business. But you have a greater sense of connection to, and of course, it's not just about people. I know it's not just about people, but it is. It's probably the most emotional and difficult one to deal with. So I think it's
Yeah.
just different. I'm not sure you could say it's easier in a bigger business. It's probably less personal, sure.
It's more emotional, more connected to every individual in a smaller company. Often the news is shared with everyone at the same time.
Yeah,
So you're all going through it together. You'll try your absolute best. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever really had the time to afforded to me to turn the corner. I mean, I've always looked at operating in the most efficient way, and I've been told, look, this is our target. Let's reduce costs by X amount, or it's just been my personal target without losing quality. But when there is a big decision based on downturn, it's just never been fully in my control to determine how long I've got, and therefore be able to do everything I wanted to do. Certainly in times where I know it's a seasonal slowdown, obviously not when you get a bit bigger, because there's shareholders questioning, like, why aren't you making money in 3 months of the year?
yeah,
And you need to find new ways and diversify your offering and get those numbers in.
yeah. And I guess and look, we're clearly advocating for, when you feel a softening, don't just cut. Utilize the time to improve your business. I think it's a great mantra. It's a great mindset, but there is also, you can't get away from the fact that you also will need to take cost out of your business. And I've always been a big fan, and I think generally staff really kind of appreciate this, is to, rather than just saying, right, who were the last 10 in, you've got to go. You're the last 10, you've got the least time, so we're going to cut you. I think, the first thing you can do is ask people whether there's anybody who would like to step away. You normally got some people close to retirement. Maybe they'll, so that's always a good option. And the other one then is, if you go to talk to the team and say, look, this is the challenge we have. We can lose people, or we can reduce hours. And or if you ever have to do any overtime, because even when times are soft, you still end up incurring overtime for certain things. We can't pay you the overtime at the moment. We'll give you time off in lieu. You can bank it and use it later. And it's kind of trying to treat people like adults and say, here's our challenge. We have this cost bucket. We're not getting, the revenue is down. You can see the volume is low. How about we all go on to 30 hours a week instead of 40? And I think most teams would rather collectively take a small hit than say to people, no, just get rid of those 10 people. So, I mean, I've definitely cut shifts, reduced shifts, and, gotten rid, to cut
You look at all
overtime,
of this stuff, your
delayed
contracts.
benefits and things like this. So I guess what I'm saying is that even when it does get into you have to save money, it's not always got to be sack 'em.
No, no, not the first thing you look at. You look at the premises, the rent you're paying, the stock you're holding, the opportunities that you can build on, and this is great, and it can really kick start things. But it's great if it makes a massive difference. The problem, it's a good thing to do whatever the case. Without there being a downturn, it's always great to have the time to look at this stuff. But you're right. In the case where you do know that something's got to be done, yes, I think the first thing to do. I mean, it's always around reducing waste, space, movement, whatever it is. What's your feelings on markdowns as a reaction to downturns? I've worked somewhere before where we had more markdowns than you could keep up with, and the problem with that was that the customer would get used to the pattern and start shopping during the markdowns. So we had more sales, but at less retail value. So it didn't really achieve what we were looking for. So in fact, we looked at our model. Why are we why are we forced to do that? And we actually made great positive changes by looking at the way we purchase stock, the RTV process, um, and it did a lot for our warehouse space as well. What was your feeling on these markdowns as a reaction?
I've got some good experiences of this, having worked with food retailers, big supermarkets, in a number of different countries as well. And in the UK, promotions are always part of those businesses, right? But in the UK, it was definitely a footfall driver. These were loss leaders. We're willing to put some products on the end of your aisles or down the middle, as high promotional items to drive people in, but they were a relatively small percentage of the overall shop, and that works. I think that's a valuable process to encourage people in, particularly in a very competitive market. But if you're not careful, and I've seen this when I've worked in many other countries where promotional items become too much. And what you then start to see is people will come in, they'll buy the promotional stuff, and then they'll go and buy the other stuff somewhere else. It adds volume into your business, which you're not making much margin on. So the cost goes up, the revenue doesn't go up, and your margins shrink. I've worked in a number of countries where you've gotten to the point where promotions become like 30-40% of your sales, and you're just not making it. And as soon as you start to try to cut them back, people stop shopping there. And particularly if you've got two or three retailers doing the same thing, it just becomes this horrible kind of monster that you can on your back that you can't get off. And then really driving margin becomes very hard. And what happens? They come to the operation and say, look, I know you're doing more and more work, but you need to cut costs. If you want to clear some stock out and it comes at a certain time of year and it's within a controlled environment, it drives some sales, it clears some stock, even potentially reaches your brand to people who wouldn't buy at full price right now. It
Absolutely.
makes them an advocate of your brand, and when they are in a position, they will come back and they will buy. And therefore, it's a great thing. But if it's administered too heavily, people stop buying your product unless it's on promotion, unless it's marked down, and then you're into a cycle of destruction, really. So it's one of those things that I think it has a place, but you gotta be careful. It's got to be careful. It's like a drug, and it can become obsessive and really destructive if you overdo it.
Well, it can be further, but more destructive with your relationships with the brands, if you're a retailer, because they want to take control of their own markdowns. They're not too keen on you marking down their products. Luxury fashion is not high street fashion. They're not.
They overbought and they're not selling. However, but you still get into this difficult position of, maybe it's not selling through another retailer, but if you end up with a lot of stock that is not selling, you have to do something with it. One of the things that luxury used to do, stick it in landfill, right? Can't do that anymore, or you're certainly not going to be able to do it for much longer, and rightly so. So I get, you don't want your brand to be diluted. But at the same time, you don't want your business to be destroyed while you try to protect the reputation of your brand. So you've got to find a balance between those two.
Absolutely, it's a delicate balance, and it's one of the most stressful things the supply chain director needs to do. Some things are out of our control. Brand negotiations, you can influence them. You can feed the information back. You can work with the buyers to come up with something. Sale or return, consignment, RTV policies, but it's where having an interconnected world is so important. Communication and visibility. What are we spending on this warehouse and on these 500 people in it? But if we had any advice for founders who are, wondering what to do as they approach these moments for the first time, what would you suggest? How they start planning for this from the earliest days? When you're caught in the frenzy of building a business. We run our own businesses, Dan. We also have downtime. I use that time to strengthen my framework and do outreach and all the rest of it. Not always possible if you're building an e-commerce business, but how can a founder plan for the inevitable quiet moments?
Yeah, and I think one of the key parts to this is exactly what you've just said. You need to plan for it. To plan for it, you need to be able to see it. So you need to know your operation. You need to know what it's costing, know where the cost is. So when you start to see struggles or demand that is not where you'd want it to be, it's not a case of right, okay, now I need to find all this information out so I can decide how to best save money, right? Because the reality is that isn't what happens. If a founder or a leader doesn't know the detail of their cost structures or anything, they just put pressure on. They just say you need to cut by 10%, and I don't care how you do it; it's your problem. So, but
And that's
sadly,
when
it
people
should
start
be the founder's
reacting.
problem, right? Because if it's not done in a way that you think is reasonable, it can kill your business as well, because you'll cut by 10%, but then you can't meet customer demand. Or the quality of the packing that goes out is awful, or the errors go up, the late delivery, and then your demand starts to soften even more because customers are not coming back because what you're selling them is rubbish. So I think my guidance would always be for a founder is know your operation, or make sure there's somebody in it that you trust that can provide you that data. And so what you're seeing things much earlier, and therefore the reaction doesn't need to be so knee jerk, that you can start to make amendments or you can start to plan to do things. I think it all starts with visibility and having the insight. And it's very easy when a founder is growing a business and it's all forwards, forwards, forwards. And we've said this before, you're creating a monster behind you. Founders need to be able to pause or just have a period, a day, a month or something, where they stop and they have a look over their shoulder and they use those people to make sure they understand what is going on down there. Because if you don't, you could get yourself in some serious issues when the slowdown happens, and they always happen, right? They always go through these periods.
If you don't have that day or that month, bring someone in. Bring in someone who has a
Yeah,
trusted eye who can look at this type of stuff for you and point out some of the problem areas, things that you should know about, potentially don't. Better storage, better contacts,
yep,
opportunities. So at least equip them with what to look for in the future.
yeah.
But that can be invaluable and not much investment whilst you are busy.
But it can be a bit counterintuitive sometimes, isn't it? Sometimes because you can do this while you're busy and bring somebody in, but actually when you slow down, sometimes it can still take an external person to be able to really see it, and that can feel really counterintuitive. Our costs are going up, so I'm going to pay for an external resource to come in and fix it. But the reality is, the small cost of that person coming in will save you a whole bunch of money, much more than it's going to cost you for a few days of or week or so's day rate for a consultant to take a good look and give you a clear indication of what you can do. It might feel counterintuitive, but it's good value without a doubt.
You're paying not a lot for invaluable experience and information that
Yeah,
can
yeah,
help protect your business from a much earlier stage rather than when the problem happens. Often people put it as, oh, it's too much information. This is too much information for me, but it's invaluable to know, to me, how much you're spending on your packaging, how much you're spending on your shipping, how much air you've got in your packaging. Um, all these things that a founder probably hasn't had time to think about, and all of these are things harder to cut when it's urgent.
yeah.
It's much, much harder to suddenly change packaging supplier when you've got 3 months to make a cost cuts.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's a common problem today that we're drowning in data but starved of information. I think you
Yeah,
sort of say, "Oh, this is too much. This is too much," and it's really common that scenario where there's just data. I don't know where to start, and I think that's where there's a real skill in taking data and translating it. You need detail, right? Somebody needs to look at the detail, but if you're the founder, you might not. And the real skill of a manager who sits under those founders is being able to translate that data, vital, really important, detailed data, and provide a relatively simple but intuitive view, insightful view of what's happening. And it can
yeah.
be done. You can boil things down to very simple things and trends where you can see enough to be able to know that maybe you need to look at the next level of detail to understand it, or to be able to interpret it in a way to gives you some clarity on what you should do about it. But if all you can see is the detail, yeah, you hear founders. I struggle with it myself sometimes. If it's just floods and floods of data, you need to be able to turn it into something which is informative.
Certainly in training experts up so that you can trust them and it frees you up to make changes yourself as a founder. You're never going to have the time to do that. So I think it's always very valuable for someone to come in and have a look at what you're doing and bring the team on for the journey because it equips them for the future, gives them that visibility, but definitely the clarity as well. Where they can do better, where waste is occurring in their own jobs. It's intricate, but it's simple, if that makes sense. It's a
Yeah,
lot of
the
information,
logic is quite simple.
but a lot of it is actionable if only it was organised in the right way, in the right priority. Some things, it's not an immediate priority, but other things, oh, come on, that I hate the phrase low hanging fruit, but some things are, let's pick that off before it goes rotten. Uh, let's address it when it's ripe.
There are very few businesses that don't have the so-called low-hanging fruit. There are
Yes.
always, and quite often they're in blind spots for founders and things. It's just something they just don't look at, And sometimes when you point this stuff out, they're kind of amazed, but it's just like it's not a
Being
shock.
able to slow
It's you're
down
just not
enough.
looking at that detail enough to be able to see it, And it's not your fault. You've got a lot to do, but yeah, and I think that's the value of, as you say, bringing in that fresh pair of eyes, just short term, get someone in, take a good look at it with experienced eyes that can translate all of that into some real insightful information which adds value to you, that it's not just a page full of numbers that you don't get.
Well, another thing that bringing someone in will do is to help, is to follow the product. It's never an easy thing for a busy team to do, but someone actually follows the product through the whole journey, understands why it's being returned, how it's being returned, where damages are occurring. I mean, once it was as simple as I looked at product damages and realised that they just needed to lay a carpet down in the photo studio. Now it sounds simple, but that wasn't. It wasn't a loud enough signal when the team were just dealing with returns and damaged stock. I mean, it wasn't. they didn't have the bandwidth to actually understand that, but I did, and I was able to walk that product through the entire journey. I wasn't bogged down with the day to day. That was a
Yeah.
luxury that I had, and
The
it
joy
was
of
very
value stream.
simple for me to work out where things were going wrong. Obviously, that saved them thousands, and they had no downtime, but they afforded themselves some downtime, which was me. So I think that's a
Yeah.
benefit that can't be underestimated.
We both know that value stream mapping can uncover some incredible things. But two things, I guess. One, normally most people in a business are far too busy to really get into it. But secondly, because they look at it every day, you just don't see it. But you can only really do it as an
That's my
external.
favourite thing. My favourite thing, I think, is
Yeah.
my favourite thing about being a consultant, I think, is giving the founder that luxury and looking at all these really confusing, unattractive processes that they just get a headache about. Walking through the samples process, walking through the studio, walking through picking and packing, and just seeing people, talking to people, asking them questions, and then understanding, building clarity. I get great satisfaction in providing those documents to a founder and saying, "Did you know this could be resolved by the?" And just the freedom, the happiness on their face is so simple. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's lots of things a founder can do. Um, what should I do tomorrow? One thing.
The first thing I would be doing, even if whether they have any softening issues or not, is make sure you have some visibility of your operation and what your business is doing. I'm not talking about this value stream mapping, that's a big job, big process, but make sure that you can see how your money is being spent and what the operation is doing, how, have some insight, because when you start to have these challenges, that becomes absolutely invaluable. And when you see the softening, consider for a short period bringing in an external, because they can make a big difference quickly, whereas those that see it every day can't always do that. But my number one would be, before any of this ever starts, just make sure you're armed with the right information to be able to make that decision in the future should you need to.
Yep, I think take a look at your invoices. Know what you're spending on what.
Yep.
It's a simple thing to do, even if you don't understand the intricate details. Know what you're spending the most on. Ask yourself, is that what you expect to be doing? Um, if you're paying someone excess for something, question. That's the very first thing you can do, because these are the things that you will need to think about as you streamline, not just when there's a downturn. And these are the things that will be asked of you further down the line anyway. So
Yeah.
that's what I would do. Just make sure you've got somebody looking at your invoices and make sure you're looking at them as well.
And it's easy to stand here and preach this, and I know that's not what we're doing. We're just trying to give some guidance and some advice. Founders are always running at 2,000 miles an hour, 24 hours a day. So we know it's not easy, but it is just something that somebody in your business needs to be creating. And I think if there's one message that anybody should get from the discussion we've had today, is creating some visibility as to how your business runs and where you're spending your money will make a huge difference when you're getting into challenges, and you'll be able to respond much quicker. I think it's great advice.
And if you've got any questions, pick up the phone and chat to your network. Have a
Yeah,
chat with us. Respond to any of these episodes for questions of your own if you're listening to these and you want to know a little bit more. You want to run ideas in front of us, please do. That's what we're here for. Subscribe, like, share, indulge, and enjoy.
absolutely. Subscribe to Under the Pallet Wrap Tell us what you think. We love hearing from you. Until next week, we'll say goodbye.
Goodbye.